How you doing, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to today's webinar. We will get the content going in just a couple of minutes, so sit tight for now. Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. And we hope you're all well and that the sun is shining wherever you are today. My name is Peter Hunt and I will be your host for today. I'm the marketing manager here at Action Point. We have a very pertinent topic for your attention today, and we hope you get some value on it as you plan to make technology decisions in the coming year. I suppose, look, let's start on an optimistic note. The pandemic, the end of the pandemic is in sight, and Ireland passing the 1 millionth vaccine barrier just last week, with restrictions easing right across the country as we head into the summer months. I guess it's time to look forward and return to our digital transformation initiatives. But to make any digital transformation a success, be it customer related, employee related, or process focused, we must ensure that the foundation is resilient, robust, and scalable. I guess that brings us to today's topics. IT transformation, your guide to HCI and modern storage. Let's have a quick look at the agenda. Oops, sorry. Back one. Sorry, a bit of a technical. I suppose, look, the agenda, just to recap here. So data center trends, what's driving the rapid adoption of HCI? Greg Costello will be taking us through that section. He'll also be looking at freeing up valuable resources by reducing your hardware footprint, a key feature of HCI. Better storage, lower cost, reduce capex by using a scale up / scale out architecture. Jonathan Dean will take us through this next section. And then it's on to, I suppose, a key element of HCI being software-defined storage, a smarter, more resilient approach. We're shortening the I suppose the presentation section of today's webinar. We really want to focus on a panel discussion, and we'll be bringing in our guest speaker at that time as well. I guess a little bit about Action Point for people who may not have heard of us before. We help companies achieve their greatest potential using the power of technology. And I guess our business is kind of cut into three key segments: consultancy and advice, managed IT services, and custom software development. If you look at our data center credentials, we've been delivering data center solutions for over 15 years. We've vast experience in both public and private sector. And I'd like to welcome both public and private sector participants in today's webinar. You are both very welcome, and hopefully the content is relevant for you guys. I guess we're known for our resilient designs in solution architecture, from dual independent to stretch to hybrid solutions. So really a broad skill set we have an Action Point with deploying solutions. And finally, we're a Dell Platinum partner and have been delivering Dell solutions since day dot, really. Okay, time for a quick poll. We want to get a sense of what is happening in your data center and what are the key decisions you're looking to make. So it's a simple enough question. What is your organization planning its next infrastructure refresh? So 5 options there. Currently exploring options: 1 to 3 months, 4 to 6 months, 6 to 12 months, and 12+ months. So please do let us know. It will certainly help to drive some of the panel discussion questions a little bit later. So I'm just going to give that a couple of seconds, and while I'm doing that, I'm going to ask our speakers to turn on their mics and cameras, and we'll do a quick introduction with everybody. So get the last final few answers in there, and I will close the poll. Brilliant. So I can actually drop the presentation for a second there, Michaela, and I'll go around the table. So the first person up there is Greg Costello. So Greg, why don't you give us a brief background on yourself and a little introduction, please?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Greg Costello, and I am Enterprise Business Development Manager with ActionPoint. I've been involved in the IT industry for 30 years, having worked in Ireland, UK, and USA in roles ranging from software development, IS management, project management, and IT solution sales. I suppose my first introduction to Converge and Hyper-Converged was back in 2015 when ActionPoint teamed up with Dell as the OEM on the first iteration of the OGP compute and storage framework. I'm delighted to say that in the interim, ActionPoint has enjoyed numerous mini competition successes and delivered many converged and hyper-converged infrastructure-based solutions to both private and public sector companies and entities. My goal for today is to help you to understand why, when it comes to, or more and more, why, when it comes to refreshing their traditional business compute and SAN environments, the vast majority of customers, both private and public, are choosing a hyper-converged solution as the best solution to meet rapidly changing business demands for innovation, modernization, and cost containment, as well as positioning themselves to better compete in shifting markets, creating deeper customer relationships, and capitalizing on new sources of revenue.
Brilliant.
Look forward to speaking with you later. Thank you.
Looking forward to it, Greg. Thanks a million. Jonathan Dean, you're up next.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Dean, IT Services Director with ActionPoint. I work very closely with Greg and members of the sales team and assist in designing solutions for our clients. I also work with the support teams and professional services teams in on project work and support escalation. I'm going to take you through some of the more technical aspects of hyper-converged infrastructure later, and hopefully you'll find that of benefit. Thanks very much.
Excellent. And finally, our special guest speaker from Dell this afternoon will be Martin Sinnott. Martin.
Yeah, good afternoon. So Martin Sinnott's my name. I work for Dell Technologies. My current role is a sales engineering senior manager. So I look after all the inside sales technical people. And we work to develop solutions for many of the customers in Ireland that we see, public sector, private sector, that sort of stuff. So I'm just my 22nd year in Dell. 15 years of those were spent in support, and then the rest has been spent selling and designing solutions for customers. Over the last kind of 4 or 5 years, I've worked with ActionPoint and Greg on the OGP framework and obviously the wider businesses on hyper-converged and converged technologies, leading to the VxRail solution that we look at presenting today. Dell itself has been a major employer in Ireland. We are one of the biggest IT companies in the world. Our turnover last year was 94 billion, which is the biggest turnover we've had ever. We are now amalgamated with obviously EMC, and we are a sole owner, or sorry, a major part owner of VMware. So our integrations with VMware has borne the VxRail and HCI kind of market. Dell as a company and HCI actually has a very big market share in the hyper-converged environment, and has had that since its inception on the Gartner Magic Quadrant. So looking forward to the paneling session later on, where we'll answer a lot of questions for you.
Yeah, I think it's actually a good cue. So we'll pass over to Greg now in a second, but I think it's a good cue just to remind people that, you know, you drive the panel discussion, and we want to hear from you. So at any stage throughout the webinar today, just leave your questions in the question box here on GoToWebinar, and I'll put your questions to the panel at the end of the show. So that's it. So I'm going to hand over to Greg Costello, who's going to take us through the first section of today's webinar. And I'll just ask Martin and Jonathan to flick off their cameras, and we'll see you guys a little bit later.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Today I'm going to talk to you about particularly some of the trends that are happening in the market that are having an impact on the data center. Perfect, thank you. So yeah, look, the first one is no surprise to anyone. It's all about digital. That's all that anybody can talk about, be it modernization, transformation, win differently, faster paper. That's all that anybody is talking about. And there's a huge push by the business on IT and looking to IT to drive and lead a lot of these initiatives. You know, it's all about going where the customer is. And since the pandemic, that has been predominantly online or people looking at self-service. This push to accelerate modernization and digital initiatives is driven by a need for companies to leverage new modern technologies to better compete in shifting markets. As I've said previously, creating deeper customer relationships and capitalizing on new sources of revenue and income. Interesting that 76% of CIOs report increased demand for new digital products or services during the pandemic, and 83% of those expect this demand to increase further in 2021. So expect digital to be top of mind for the next 12 months and beyond. One of the other key trends is ultimately around convergence and software defined, and how this is shrinking the digital footprint within the data, or the physical footprint within the data center. Silos are now being replaced. They're being consolidated. They're being centralized. So ultimately what's happening here is, like what's happened outside of the data center and outside of IT to an extent, the market, and be it IT infrastructure, is moving from a build to a consume. And as we've seen in mobile and other industries that are there, it's all about consumption. And customers are looking to consume rather than to build themselves or own it or manage it. So this deployment shift is being driven by a need for IT as well to focus limited economic and human capital resources on driving business innovation, which results in fewer resources available to focus on the infrastructure. So they're being asked, particularly as a result of the pandemic, the business is now looking to IT to lead and drive innovation, transformation, modernization initiatives within the business to drive that business forward. And it's also interesting to note that 70% of CIOs report that they have deepened their knowledge on specific business processes to best advise the business as to how they can leverage technology or best leverage technology to deliver these transformational and modernization initiatives. The third one that I have there is, again, it's multi-cloud. And I suppose it's a realization within a trend within I suppose, business leaders, etc., that cloud is an operating model rather than a destination. There was a huge rush to the cloud, a lot of talk around cloud first, etc. What companies and business leaders are coming to realize is that the future is multi-cloud, and ultimately where workloads sit and on what cloud they sit, be it on-prem, be it hybrid, be it public, be it edge, whatever cloud that they're sitting on, ultimately it's about getting under the hood of the application and the workload to understand how that works, how it integrates with other processes and systems, and then from there determining what is the right cloud platform. As I said, that could be on-premise, it could be public cloud, it could be edge cloud. So what is the right solution, the best fit cloud solution for that application and that workload. But it is all the move, and the trend is to multi-cloud. As we would have seen as well, one thing that the last 12 months has proved to us is that the importance of agility and dexterity and the ability to be able to shift tack like that boat out of, I don't know if any of you are watching the ocean racing that was going on down in New Zealand there recently, changing tack. So as the winds change, they change tack to take advantage of that, and being able to do quickly and effectively, and also using technology to be able to look forward and try and predict some of that, where the winds are, where they need to be, where they need to position the boat, what lanes they need to be in. So what we know is the top performing companies know that disruption isn't the exception, it's the rule, and they seek to create disruption or seek it out because that provides an opportunity for competitive gain for them and competitive advantage. The big winners from the pandemic were those companies that built on and took advantage of their predominantly online presence, or were able to transform themselves quickly to move to an online digital delivery model. As Satya Nadella, head of Microsoft, remarked, companies have experienced 2 years of change in 2 months as they struggled to adapt to the new normal of remote work and moving their businesses online, as well as being tasked with formulating post-pandemic strategies, including what they need to do to better position themselves to shift mode when future disruptions occur. Because this is not going to be, it may not be a health pandemic or a health issue, public health issue, but definitely we can guarantee there's going to be more events and significant events going forward. 69% of boards report accelerating digital business initiatives in response to COVID-19. The fifth point that I have there is around supply chain, and that's one of the things, and we're experiencing that ourselves in the IT industry. We've seen it with regard to the shortage of spinning disk, companies being impacted, and businesses and factories being impacted by COVID-19, having to shut or close, which has had an impact on the supply chain. And prior to COVID-19, companies and businesses would have devoted a lot of time and attention into optimizing their supply chain to make it ultra efficient. So much so that when a simple event like a pandemic came along, it broke. So ultimately, in response to that, what companies are looking to do now is to incorporate redundancy into their existing supply chains to make it more resilient. 51% of CIOs reported a decline in speed of supply, and 18% reported a decline in the last months in supplier reliability as a result of COVID. In response to that, 40% of business leaders say they are duplicating key suppliers to create redundancy. 1/3 are bringing more business processes in-house, which will be a key consideration for IT and modernization initiatives. And 1/4 are bringing more sales and delivery services in-house. So that sort of time to market and being able to shift tack and deliver new applications, new services, that's going to be key going forward. The sixth and final point that I have there is obviously the shift to skills development versus talent acquisition. We all understand the current challenge of recruitment and retention. Increased demand without the constraints of physical location, coupled with the continued shortage of experienced, skilled professionals in the market, has increased costs. Equally, 74% of companies have reported that they've had a hiring freeze in place, or had to implement a hiring freeze to contain costs as a result of the pandemic. So now what's happened is, coupled with the shortage, increased costs, companies are having to look within. So they're looking more to developing talent and developing skills rather than going out into the market and procuring it or acquiring it. Additionally, if we look at AI, machine learning, event-driven software, robotic process automation, and other type of decision process and task automate are allowing businesses to automate, de-risk day-to-day labor-intensive, low-value tasks and processes. So hopefully that all makes sense. I picked 6 key trends there that I felt were more relevant. I probably could have put another 6 on top of that. So now I'm going to go to the second part of it. Ultimately about HCI and why to me and why to us this makes so much sense. And this is, without getting cliche, a technology for its time. And I know we'll discuss that on the panel. But ultimately, the key deliverable, the key benefit of HCI and hyper-converged solutions is in terms of simplifying IT operations and reducing costs. HCI solutions take a software-defined approach that, as you can see from the diagram here, collapses all compute, storage, networking, and virtualization resources and layers down to a single scale-out stack that is deployed on a cluster of typically industry standard x86 servers. So if you can imagine, if you can look at those 3 layers there, server, storage, and networking, typically your refresh cycle for your storage, for your servers, would be less than that of storage, and which would in itself be less than that of your network. Typically, people don't refresh or change network as often as they would storage or servers. Each of those layers would have their own procurement cycle. They would have their own management and maintenance and patching and update cycles. So you can imagine how being able to shrink or collapse that all into a single platform running on an x86 server appliance could reduce and benefit from that. So if you look at it, as I said, standardization there. So the key points, standardization, consolidating compute, storage, and networking onto a single server-based platform. This reduces TCO. So you're looking at typically, and when we talk about HCI solutions, we're looking at a reduction in reducing CapEx by 1/3, reducing OpEx by 2/3. Now, when we look at IT budgets and the forecast for this year, average IT budgets are expected to increase by 2%, which isn't, if we're looking at HCI here as the ability to provide that platform for modernization, transformation, innovation, as well as giving money back to the business to devote to those activities, to those value-add activities, business creation, business generation activities, giving money back through CapEx and OpEx. Typically, the payback on a HCI solution is less than 1 year. And that's not to say around as well, because we're now simplifying the model, we're basically procuring nodes or that modular approach. You're looking at a 50% reduction in the amount of time in the procurement and deployment cycles. Again, one of the benefits, so we've consolidated all of those layers onto a single platform. And on top of that, now what HCI delivers is a single management plane. So you've got full line of sight, full capabilities, full insight into all of those layers through a single GUI. And you have the addition of inbuilt automation and intelligence. What does that mean for IT departments and businesses? It means typically IT productivity is increased by 1/3, over 1/3, 36%, and reduced risk. The ability, this modular approach, this modular solution also allows for scaling. So ultimately, with the HCI solution, which differs from your traditional, you scale for what you need now, because with automated lifecycle management and inbuilt intelligence, you pay as you can. If you need to grow, you just add an additional node or more nodes. So you can scale out by adding additional nodes. If you need to retire or you need to refresh or replace, you just simply swap out a node and replace it with a new node. All of that means for you is typically, as I said, reduce CapEx. CapEx is reduced by 1/3. OpEx is reduced by 2/3. You have a pay-as-you-grow model, and you're looking at reduced time for markets of applications of 50% and a 63% improvement in application performance due to typically the setup and the design of these solutions. And finally, one of the other key benefits with regard to HCI and HCI type solutions is security. It's built in by design at every layer. Automated lifecycle management, as I said, means that as against your traditional setup, which is your siloed layered approach, each of those would have been patched and updated individually, separately, different cycles, different update cycles. Whereas now that has been consolidated with HCI consolidated onto a single platform, updates happen in parallel, all of the layers. So your software-defined storage, your virtualization compute layer, your virtualized storage and compute layers, all of those are updated at the same time. And that's done inline automatically, so de-risk the whole idea of updating those update cycles, as well as being able to do that within hours without necessarily taking applications or environments or systems or the business down or offline. Hopefully that's helped tee up some of the benefits there in respect of HCI, and I'm going to hand over now to Jonathan, and I look forward to speaking later as part of the panel.
Thanks very much, Greg. That was very good. So I suppose looking at the attendee list here, we've quite a few techies, quite a few people who have to manage their own environments. We also have an accountant, so I suppose I'll have to touch on how we can save some money by implementing HCI. So better storage, lower cost, and reducing CapEx by scaling up. So I suppose let's start with, well, why is hyper-converged better? And I suppose the very first thing to talk about there is when you're a hyper-converged solution is really a platform. It's not a set of siloed boxes. So, you used to have, it could be a compellent, it could be a power vault, it could be something else as your storage. You'd have separate compute nodes, maybe running VMware, maybe running Hyper-V, whatever your hypervisor of choice is. And then separately, you might have storage networking and data networking. It could be fiber channel, it could be Ethernet, it could be any number of things. But by moving to a HCI solution, you're picking a platform, and that one platform delivers your storage, your compute, and manages your networking all together. And by having a platform, it means that you have less components overall. You're unlikely to have separate equipment for a storage network. You've less moving parts. And so if there's less moving parts, there's less management tools. It can all be managed essentially in via one tool, via one place. And if you have ease of management, it's going to take less time to manage. Something else then, once you have tightly integrated management tools that are linking your compute, your storage and networking, it allows you to automate some of the more business as usual tasks that you used to have to do manually. Like as an admin, one of the tiresome tasks is keeping up to date with all of the different patches that are out there and firmware updates. And if you're patching fiber channel switches, you're doing firmware updates on them, and then doing firmware updates on your SAN, doing firmware updates on your compute, doing your VMware updates, and having to do a bit of research to make sure that everything is being kept in step. That, you know, this firmware update for your network cards, you know, won't conflict with this particular version of VMware drivers for your network cards, and making sure that they're all going to work together. By embracing an HCI solution, you can essentially automate the majority of that patching. And because it's platform level patching, it's not that you're updating this piece here and that piece there. The updates come down and they're across the board in, I suppose, single releases. And because it's a platform, you know those releases have been tested by the vendor and that they'll be compatible with all the different pieces that make this up. So it reduces some of the complexity in patching and keeping things up to date. So by making things easier to manage, by reducing some of the time requirements for some of the businesses as usual patching, you know, you're going to be saving some money there, saving some time. So one of the other things then about helping lower cost is that it's easy to size for what you need now, and it's easy to add should you need to add down the road. So you don't need to buy your 5 years or 3 years worth of storage up front. You can add as needed. And something else that makes it better is around, again, around it being a platform. Previously, if you were buying a box, when it came time for that box to be replaced, you generally had a fairly substantial project to replace that piece of equipment. Because it's a platform and because it's built to easily add and remove nodes, when your current hardware that's underpinning this comes to end of life, it's very easy to just add new nodes and remove old nodes. It's a business as usual task. It's a non-disruptive task, and it's, you know, it requires less downtime, no downtime in many cases. It's just makes for an easier life. We all like that. So I suppose there are some of the reasons why it's better and some of the reasons why it helps to lower cost. Because I suppose as well, just to touch on hyper-converged infrastructure, when it was new, was quite an expensive way to go about building infrastructure. But as time has gone on and it's become more popular, and as the technology has matured, and as a result of a lot more competition, the price point has come down and down and down. And now there may be an impression out there that it's an expensive way of procuring IT infrastructure, and that was the case in the past, but it is no longer the case. That's for sure. So software-defined storage. So the key underpinning piece of a HCI solution is that the storage component is software-defined. It's not only HCI solutions that are available as software-defined solutions, you know, but by having it as software-defined, again, underneath a platform and choosing a platform, it allows you to essentially, as long as you pick the right platform, day one, it's easy to grow and you stick with that platform even though the underlying hardware may change over time. So why does software-defined storage, you know, why is it smarter and why does it allow more resilience? So I suppose in terms of it being smarter, allowing for more performance, the actual storage is closer to your compute in HCI. So the storage sits in the same servers as the compute. there's less distance to be traveled when you're looking to access your data. A lot of systems take into account data locality now. And essentially, if you can get at your data quicker, you can process it quicker. And it's more suited to a lot more workloads. In terms of, how does it make it more resilient? So instead of having one or two boxes with a bit of replication between them, you have a larger cluster. So basically, the individual components, instead of having a couple of large components, you have more smaller nodes. So you can increase your fault tolerance. You can spread them out. We have some customers who run multiple nodes in one data center, others who run them as separate clusters in other data centers. We have some customers who stretch their single cluster between two data centers. And there's any myriad of options there. And we have one customer who stretches amongst 3 data centers with their software-defined storage solution, allowing for the loss of any one data center, and essentially the business continues on as normal. You can do mirroring, or you can do erasure coding, and you can choose, how much failures do you want to tolerate. So it might be a node, it might be a node plus a few disks, it might be a data center, an entire data center plus a node plus some disks. And there's any number of resilience options that you can choose. And then finally, why is it smarter? You can choose lots of different types of data that can be stored on this. So, typically with a SAN, it's block storage, and, in more recent years, file has been added. But something that's becoming more and more prevalent is object storage. And there's a number of software-defined object storage platforms out there. And we have one customer who had some very large databases, but the majority of the data sitting in those databases were actually blob objects, so scanned images. And basically, what they were able to do through the use of a software-defined object store, they were able to extract all of these binary objects out of the database, store them in object storage, and make their databases much, much slimmer and nimble, and I suppose get more bang for their buck out of their compute with the slimmer databases basically being able to speed up their processes. And it was software-defined storage that allowed this to happen in a cost-effective manner. So software-defined gives you more resilience options, and it's definitely a smarter way to go about it. So I suppose that's what I have to say on this, and I'm looking forward to taking some of your questions in the Q&A at the end of this. Thanks very
Jonathan,
much.
fantastic. Sorry, I cut you off there a bit early. Jonathan, thank you for very interesting insights there into some of the technical aspects of HCI. I'm going to ask all our speakers to join to turn on their cameras and turn on their mics and join me for the panel. Let's get straight into it. We don't have too long, so hopefully we can cover a couple of the key topics. Martin, I'm going to start with you. Yep. I was going to say why HCI, why now? But I mean, we've been deploying HCI solutions for years now. But why is it especially important now for those who haven't quite made the jump?
Yeah, I think as a couple of the guys, and Jonathan and Greg kind of covered off very well, there was this perception out there that HCI was the kind of premium brand of IT infrastructure. And for quite a long time, while the genesis of what it was coming along, it was seen as that, and actually was that. But HCI these days are coming along from a cost effectiveness perspective, and Dell Technologies, along with ActionPoint, are designing these solutions to be that cost effective nature. And if you take what software defined in and itself actually is, it's really a licensing model of software. So underpinning it is vSAN and VMware's vCenter and the virtualization software from VMware. A lot of that is per processor based, so we can in many cases get to the point where we're having single processor solutions that actually brings the cost down significantly without actually sacrificing a lot. Intel's latest Ice Lake technologies has the ability to, even in a similar core count to the old Xeon processors, we'll do a lot more work. So we're kind of engineering solutions with that kind of stuff in mind. Now, a lot of solutions will end up in a two-proc solution, but we're engineering it to be that cost effectiveness. And Dell Technologies themselves are investing a lot of money in, as Jonathan said, the engineering of the upgrades and the scripted upgrades underpinned and certified by us, and spending a lot of money in ensuring that the engineering goes into that so that you as a customer don't have to take use of that.
Yeah, it's an interesting pointer on the perception of cost. And Jonathan, I know it's something you speak about a lot. I suppose there's probably hidden benefits that aren't as obvious. I know you referenced one of the accountants in the audience today, but there is that perception there that it is an additional cost. But where's the value add, or what's the long term? What's the return on investment actually with HCI?
I suppose that the big thing is about making it easier to manage and giving people time back so that they can concentrate on the more valuable aspects in their business. Absolutely, if you go back not that long ago, just to throw some figures around, right? We would have been pricing some solutions where each node was like 80 grand. A similar node now, is much more closer to 25K for that same thing. And it's not even 3 or 4 years, right? And a lot of that has to come down with the competition in the market and people charging less for the licensing of their products, right? So competition has driven the price down. As well as that, the management tools have been getting slicker and more comprehensive with each release. And again, look, it's about giving time back, and it's about being able to do your maintenance during normal hours.
Yeah, and I think one for the panel there as well is that, are we seeing the end of the era, the big forklift infrastructure refresh? Is that coming to an end, and what does the future look like? Maybe Greg, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I would agree. Definitely, nobody has an appetite for that anymore. Systems are becoming more complex, more integrated, and therefore that whole move or that forklift upgrade is becoming more complicated, which introduces time, delay, and risk into the whole equation, all of which ultimately costs money. So I think what we're seeing now is, in the converged and hyper-converged, is that move to a platform where, and I know we'll talk about it, or Dell talk about it in terms of evergreen, and being evergreen from that, where once you move to these types of platform conversion, hyper-converged, that's the last data migration. You just simply using automated lifecycle management, you're simply swapping in and out nodes. You're adding, scaling out as you require, and then you're replacing, retiring, replacing, refreshing old nodes with new nodes, and the data is sitting there. The data is staying within that platform. The data goes nowhere. So you're benefiting from the latest and greatest technologies and changes and improvements in that area, but your data is simply sitting there on the same platform, on that platform. So that's a key element now. And we all know data is growing, right? It's going to continue to grow. There's going to be more of it. It's critical. So not having to move that around and having that essentially on the same platform and being able to leverage that is key, I think, going forward.
It's actually a good opportunity here. I have a question in here from Matt, Greg, and it might just expand on that point a little bit. It's a slightly long one. So in a traditional model, if I need more compute, but I don't need more storage or network sources, I simply add a compute node. How is HCI more agile than that? I want to take that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good question, right? And again, it goes into somebody who's trying to understand where the benefits of HCI actually comes in, and scalability is definitely one. So the answer to that question is inside the nodes, you're kind of bound by a singular box. And the only box that you really have in many cases is the processor. So once you kind of scale up on the processor on an initial purchase, memory is your next kind of commodity product outside of storage. A lot of the nodes, you can just add memory. And we have a lot of customers who come back and just add memory to add a lot of workloads. We've got tools. Live Optics is one of our tools, which actually is a free tool for everybody to use. And what it does is it deep dives into your environment using non-API based, non-application based stuff to pull out certain pointers and counters to get you an idea of what your systems look like today and have the ability then to look at it moving forward. But adding memory is very, very easy in these environments, these scenarios, because the maximum size you can fit in a system with a single processor is 768 gigs, which is more than enough for main infrastructures. If you put two processors in, it's 1.5 terabytes of memory. So all these scalable stuff, a lot of people base it on what they might have known about IT and hardware a good while ago. But our systems are very, very scalable when it comes to this solution. Now, the next one is disks. Disks can be added. These systems have 24 2.5-inch disks, and if you want to go mad, our disk storage maximum sizes are 30 terabytes in the 2.5-inch disk. So everything can be added in-house in the block that you've already purchased. If you need to go outside of that, then another node is required.
Okay, thanks for that. I hope that answers your question, Martin. Another question in here from Stephen. If you compare the project timeframes of deploying a HCI solution versus deploying traditional storage / networking / compute, what is the expected time saving on average? I don't know if you can put a number on that, or can we just talk around it?
50% traditionally. If you look at the procurement cycle, you look at the deployment cycle, you're looking at least 50% traditionally. And that's over time. That's not a number picked out of the air. In certain cases, in certain projects, it ends up as more. That's an average over, I suppose, the lifetime of HCI that's there. But a good guideline there would be 50%, as well as the time to market for your applications, as well as that 50% reduction on average in the time to deploy a new application using HCI. That's key. 63% improvement in application performance. Now, a lot of that is down to what this is happening. We've seen, we're starting to see the end of spinning disk. And traditionally, HCI, one of the contributors to the cost of HCI would have been SSD and flash, and the requirement for SSD in there to enable deduplication technologies as well, which speaks a little bit to Matt's question there around leveraging those technologies as well to shrink the physical footprint of your storage. But now what we're seeing is the death of spinning disk. So everything is going flash and will be going flash or SSD, and that is the future. We're even talking about NVMe now versus SSD. So I think that's what's helping to close the gap here in terms of the cost. I think HCI and converged or hyper-converged was unfortunate. It hit the market in 2016, just before, I suppose, one major financial downturn and one major health scare pandemic. So a lot of companies out there have been very much sweating what they have and looking at the cost. And to be fair, we need to do a better job as IT professionals and sales professionals and solution professionals in explaining how HCI can actually save you money versus cost you more money.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I'll give you one quick answer, Peter. Apologies. I'll give you one quick answer on that. Our standard 4-node installation time is 3 days for a full 4-node implementation. And that's just to get the system stood up, VMware, and ready to receive virtual machines from your existing environment. It's 3 days. And a day of that is actually sitting with you designing how the system is going to go in. So these systems are already pre-configured out of the factory. You turn them on, you press next a few times, and they're already integrated into the solution. Now, I'm oversimplifying it, but ultimately that's how they're built out of the factory.
No, that's great. No, it's great to actually bring it to life there, Martin. I'll actually stick with you, Martin. I suppose you've been involved in several HCI projects over the years. Are there any kind of standout projects or standout case studies that you can think of that might just bring some of what we're talking about to life?
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, the population of HCI these days is huge, and in the last 2 years, the acceleration has just been absolutely astonishing from our perspective. If you look at Gartner, they've already predicted the market to grow over 300% in the next 2 years, right? So, the projects that we would deal with, like, there's a lot of very big companies in Ireland that are using this. There's a lot of big public sector bodies that are using this in line with what is going on here from the perspective of procurement. Or road safety authority is probably one that we would call out as a good example. We went down to discuss with them what their requirements were, and again, they were 321, what we determined 321, like the SAN, a couple of servers and switches, and we discussed HCI with them. And their major concern was they've no IT staff. Their IT staff, because of the pandemic, the global downturn, they couldn't rehire their IT staff. So they got one guy who looks after the whole solutions, and he's absolutely swamped with updates. We looked in their environment, ran a live optic, and found out that the systems are really, really old from a firmware security patching perspective. We positioned HCI, and they purchased it. And when they purchased it, they've subsequently bought 3 more nodes, and he does his patching on a Wednesday afternoon every 2 months by literally clicking a button, and sits back, and I like to say eats biscuits and drinks tea while he watches all this happening. And that, I physically went down to see it because, again, I was kind of skeptical, so I went down to see it, had a look, and that's exactly what it did. And I was kind of severely impressed with the technology.
That's very interesting. But one for Greg and Jonathan, really. We're talking about, Greg talks about skills, the move from skills development to skills retention. From the IT manager's perspective, maybe build on Martin's point there, like just how big an impact do time savings and operational savings make on an organization?
Ultimately, I mean, if you look at productivity and IT productivity, you're looking at an increase of 1/3. Typically, IT productivity increases by 1/3. In terms of OpEx, as I said, you're looking at 2/3. Obviously, part of that is the less day-to-day that needs to be done, leveraging automation and inbuilt intelligence and self-healing, lifecycle management, automated lifecycle management that comes out of the box, single pane of glass, single view of your total environment across all of those previous silos, storage, networking, and switching. But you're also looking at a reduced footprint in the data center. So you're talking about less power, less cooling, all of that that's there. So all of that contributes to reducing your OpEx costs traditionally and typically by 2/3. So as I said, this is a solution which stacks up. If you're looking at ROI, you're looking at over 100% per annum. Typically, if you're looking at payback, the system is, in terms of CapEx, procurement, and OpEx savings, typically is paid for itself within 1 year. And that has been feedback from IDC surveys, etc., suggesting that IT productivity increase, or the ability to increase IT productivity to free up time from the day-to-day of the business as usual, as Jonathan said, to concentrate on more value-add business-facing activities and reaching back into the business to talk to them about how technology can have a positive effect on innovation and modernization and transformation, freeing up the time for IT people to get into it. Because one of the things we've learned as part of the pandemic, and one of the things that business leaders outside of the IT department has learned, is that there is no business without IT. IT is the business. And therefore, if they want to succeed and grow and be successful in the future, they're going to do that using IT. IT is going to be key to their continued success and growth and evolution in the future. So IT are being asked to get involved and being tasked to get involved in these business modernization and transformation initiatives, because they're a key player.
Thanks a million, Greg. Sorry, I actually hit the poll button a bit sooner. I'm actually going to wrap it up. I just want to look at some of the poll results, and maybe we can advise some of the attendees out there today. So 29% are currently exploring options. So the question was, when is your organization planning its next infrastructure refresh? 29% currently exploring options, and then there's a blend of 4 to 6 months, 6 to 12 months, 12 plus months. It probably brings us to our call to action, but I suppose for those currently exploring options, guys, like what are the next steps? Like, what should they be considering? Should they maybe not bin the current project framework, but can they quickly switch to a HCI solution as part of their project plan?
Absolutely, like anything else, as Martin has said there, we can come in and we can get around it. Well, we can have that conversation. We can virtually get around the table. We've got tools and tool sets there which will allow us to analyze the existing environment, so that we can size and we can put that on the table and give those customers or companies a view of what a HCI solution would look like and what it would cost for comparative purposes, and then discuss some of the benefits on top of that, some of the tangible benefits, and build a TCO model around that for them. So absolutely, and that would be a first step. Let's go in and see what you have, because every customer's environment is different, and it's important, rather than us, although there is, you know, a move to commoditization as well, it's important that we don't just position HCI as the solution to every problem. It's winning out, and Dell as the #1 globally in 2020, 2.5 times the next company, HP, will be second. Yeah, so 2.5 times, you know, Dell ships 2.5 times more systems, more HCI solutions than anybody else on the planet.
Thanks, Greg. So yeah, look, guys, I suppose we're at that time of the webinar now. I know people are probably keen to get the sandwich on. So I'm gonna wrap things up there. I just want to remind all attendees there's going to be a survey after this webinar. Please fill it out. We'd love to hear your thoughts as always. But there's actually a section in that survey to request a follow-up call. And a follow-up call is to set up a virtual demo of HCI environment. So our partner Dell will be supporting us on that. And basically we can set you up virtually. You can see what a VxRay looks behind the scenes. You can see the dashboards, all the components, all the single pane of glass. So really bring it to life, and hopefully, and that's completely free, and hopefully it'll help guide your decision as you look to refresh your infrastructure in 2021. Yeah, that's about all. That's about it from us. Very much thank you for taking the time out today to listen to our presentations. I'd like to thank all our speakers, Greg, Jonathan, and Martin, for very engaging and enlightening panel. And hopefully we'll see you all again soon at a webinar. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Okay.